Parents by a Mad Painter, aka T.R. Becker. It was a warm spring night, cloudless sky with 2 full moons that hid most all the points of light but the brightest. The whole tribe was there, as they always were when both moons were full. There was a light breeze that carried the scent of light pink flowers that filled the valley. It was Manda's duty to watch the parents. That was what they called the moons. He was not really sure why, but the old elders were not to be asked questions of. He was smart, but he was no hunter. He found it hard to kill anything that had life. He ate little animal meat, but in the winter, that was all there was at times. He sat on top of the bluff, looking down at where the people were. He thought it would be a feast that would be talked about all year. The 6 drummers were in rhythm, and the dancers were casting shadows all around the rocks from the light of the large fire they moved around. It was impressive to see, and he could feel it in his soul. It was hypnotic. The last time the 2 full moons were in the sky, he had been a child, too young to understand. They were in the sky together a lot, but never often at the same time. He was trying to figure out why, but was not having much luck at it. No one understood just how they could float in the sky. The bigger one was called Father, and the other Mother. Father was always in front. There was just so many full moons a year, and it was up to him to know when they would happen. He found himself tapping his foot to the beat of the drums. He never felt the need to be around others. He was a loner. He was up at night most of the time, as the rest was asleep. Not many studied the night sky. He missed his teacher, Moss, who had died 2 winters ago. He had showed him how to read the marks on the cave walls. The marks were old, so old no one knew who had made them. Some believed that Mother had come down and made them, but he didn't think so. He looked up at her. He noticed that she looked a little closer than normal. She was bright, but he could still see the clouds that moved around her. Many thought it was her veil, but he knew they were just clouds, just like the world had, but many times thicker. He was not one to believe in superstitions or in old mythos. He did keep an open mind about them. He really thought most things could be explained by nature, like the parents. How could they stay in the sky, and how far were they? Or what were the points of light in the night sky? He knew that the answers were out there somewhere. The elders would choose tonight who would become his apprentice. He was not sure if he liked the idea, but the elders had chose him 10 seasons back. They had not asked him what he had thought about any of the youth, nor, for that matter, had let him know who any of them were. The drums stopped. He looked back down the valley at the group. The chief and the shaman stood in front of the rest of the tribe. The ceremony had begun, but he was too far away to hear what was being said. They would be asking the parents to bless the land for full crops. He didn't believe that the parents had any control over their crops, but they did have some control over the tides. The tribe believed that all things had a spirit, and their spirit had come from the parents when the world was first formed. 2 young men led a small cow in front of the shaman. They made sure never to sacrifice one that would not be able to be consumed the night of the ceremony. The blood would be made into wine, blessed by the shaman, to be used in the weekly ceremonies. He never went to them, nor did he drink any wine. He did, however, smoke some of the plants that grew around the forest. The shaman raised a crystal axe over his head with both hands. It came down with the force needed to crack the cow's skull. The cow struggled and then fell to the ground. As the people yelled so loud he was able to hear them. Within minutes it was gutted and skinned, and a pole ran through it, and it was across the cooking fire. He wondered how many of them really believed in the power of the ceremony. There had to be some who thought like he did, but were afraid to say anything for fear of what the others would say or do. The shaman could have them beaten or banished from the tribe. He thought that the elders were scared of how much power he held. It was power that came from fear the people had of their souls not being able to join the parents in the skies when they died. There was a long flash of light across the sky near the horizon. This happened all the time at night, but no one knew what they were. He thought he knew, but never tell anyone. He thought they were pieces of what the world was made of. He had no proof of this. It was just a feeling. He thought that the parents were worlds like the one they all lived on. He had been able to talk with his mentor about this kind of thing without fear, but Moss had passed 2 seasons ago. He missed the old man a lot. He was a father to him for over 10 years, never knowing his real father. His mother had taken up with another man named Nod that didn't like him much and had talked to the elders and had him placed with Moss. He was 10 then and didn't like the man either, and could see his mother any time he wanted, so it was no big deal. He got to see her about once a week to make sure she was doing good and happy. She was, and that was all that really mattered to him. He had to move into the cave with Moss, and really it was a lot nicer than living in a teepee. Warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer. The night breeze brought with it the smell of the sacrifice bull. His new apprentice would bring him dinner, and he would have to eat the meat, if he wanted to or not. He must agree to teach them before the meal was done. It gave the apprentice a little time to talk about why he wanted to be the next star guide. Not many wanted the job. He was never given a choice, but he didn't have any regrets. He looked back up at the parents. Father would be full for 2 more nights, but Mother would be back behind Father again tomorrow night, or not in the sky at all. Many of them wondered what she was doing when not in the sky, but he knew that she was on the other side of her world. The tribe would never believe that they lived on the outside of a giant rock ball. It was near midpoint of the night when he noticed 3 figures walking towards him. They stopped about 50 yards away for a moment, then 2 continued to him. They were the chief and the shaman. He stood up and got down from the rock he was sitting on. "What brings the 2 most important men from the festival?" he asked. The chief spoke. "Well, none other than a vision quest." A vision quest, he thought? What could he have to do with a quest? "Yes, one I had," the shaman said, "and I believe it came from the parents." He said it so matter-of-factly that Manda thought he believed what he said. "I was shown a future that, if not kept in check by what I believe to be you and your apprentice, the tribe is doomed, if not the whole human race." He could feel the weight of the words. The shaman was worried about the people. Mada shook his head at them. "I don't think you have thought your vision through. I'm nobody, sure not a hero of any kind of quest." "I don't think you have any choice. The quest will find you 2, the chief said. "When I had the vision, I had not met your apprentice yet, and when I did, I knew it was a true vision." He waved at them to come towards them. They had a hood pulled over their head and carried a plate they held out to him. He took it, looked down at it. It was empty. He looked up at the shaman with wonder. "What does this mean?" "We have given you an empty plate to show that the future is open to you and what you choose to do with it." Open to him, he thought? Just what could I do to shape the future? And really, why would he want to? "I'm to set the future?" he asked. The shaman smiled. "You and your new apprentice." He reached over and pulled their hood away. Standing there was a young woman. This shocked him. There had never been a woman that was a star guide, let alone an apprentice as old as she was. "This is Eve. She's from a tribe in the far south and has spent near half of her life in journey to get here." This would mean she had been traveling for 10 or 12 years, he thought. She was in my vision before she had arrived here. He didn't understand any of this. They were saying that the fate of the tribe, and maybe the whole human race, was up to him and his new apprentice, who was to be a woman his age named Eve. He was not sure if he should be mad that they thought he would believe this, or be honored they thought he was up to saving the human race. You both should understand that this is so unusual that I need a little time to process it all. Without saying anything else, he turned and walked away holding the plate. After 2 weeks, he had grown to like Eve and was impressed by her knowledge that she held of science. She was a couple inches shorter than he was, with shoulder-length blonde hair. Her skin was a light tan, unlike his darker skin. She had told him that all her people of the tribe were the same as she was. She had taken her duties as apprentice seriously and would have dinner ready before dark each night, and he had to admit she was good at it. She had a way with the meat that he found good tasting. The women of the tribe would bring their food each few days, as they did with the chief shaman and the healer. Mada knew how to hunt if needed, and even had a small garden not far from the cave, where he had just planted a few rows of potatoes and beans just before Eve had joined him. When she found it, she added some herbs for cooking. He had no clue what kind, but he could smell them as she handed him his plate. "I hope you enjoy this. I have never tried it this way before with goat," she smiled. It smelled good to him. Goat was a white meat, but this had a pink hue to it. "What did you use on it?" "Wrapped it in red clay and baked it in the coals," she answered. He would have never have thought to do anything like that. He would have just hung it on a stick over the flames. "Is that why it's pink?" he asked. She shook her head no. "I soaked it in blood wine all day first." She had amazed him in some way every day. He didn't think at first it was going to work out, but now he was glad that she was with him. She pointed up at the painted marks on the cave walls and asked, "How far into the cave do they go?" "I've never gone that far down. Once I saw that they repeated a few times, I stopped. Nature is a big circle, and as I'm sure you realize, so I saw no need to go deeper. From what I see, Father rises in about an hour after sunset and will be half full. Mother an hour later, but will only be a waning crescent," she said. "You have learned well. You say that where you from the parents would show differently at the same time." "Yes, it has to do with the angle that we would be seeing them. I believe it is because we live on a huge ball." He almost laughed. "Don't let the chief or the shaman hear you say that." They sat on the rock overlooking the valley at sunset. He had her name the lights as they appeared in the sky. She had told him that only some of the lights were the same, but many were not where she came from. "What do you think the lights are?" he asked her. "The same as you, I believe. They are suns like ours." He knew that she was smiling. Before he could say anything, he noticed there was a few torches heading up the trail. It looked to be a couple of wagons coming their way. "We have company on the way," he pointed at the torches. "I'll put some water on for tea if you like." He nodded his head. "Sounds good to me." It was strange that they'd be coming up there in the dark. Why not come when it was light out? It was a hard pull in the day for horses. Why risk a broken leg? By the time they reached him, Father had risen and he was able to see the driver of the first wagon as it stopped. It was a warrior named Two Arrows. "Mada, I bet you have a few questions about our midnight train." Most of his questions were answered by the time the men had taken the supplies deep into the cave. For some reason, the chief, shaman, and the elders all thought that a mile deep in the cave was the best place to keep the tribe's surplus supplies. He thought it was a good idea and wondered why it had not been done before. It was almost dawn when the men started back down to the village. They moved the supplies at night so not as many people would see what they were doing. He was not sure why that would matter. Eve joined him to watch the sunrise. Will they not want to set guard on the caves now? She asked him. I say we are the guards. A better question for me is, what do they know that they're not telling us? He sighed. I wonder if it has something to do with the vision the shaman had. 2 weeks went by without anything unusual happening. It was not yet dark. Eve and him was sitting, waiting on Father to rise. He would be full again, and Mother would rise soon after. Eve pointed down the valley and said, Look, the wagons are coming again. She was right. There was 5 headed their way. When they were halfway, he said, I don't think it's supplies. He was right. It was people. The wagons were filled with children. What was going on, he wondered. Why would they send children up to them? The sun was down, but it was still light out when the wagon reached them. As before, 2 arrows was in the lead wagon. The elders has set you a task, he smiled at them. Set a task, he thought? What on earth would they want us to do with the children? There was a good 50 from 1 to 10 years old and a couple of teenage girls. They told me to tell you to take them into the cave where you place the supplies and keep them there for 3 days and nights. Eve spoke up. Does this have something to do with the shaman's vision? 2 arrows shook his head. I have no clue about any vision, just what the elders told me. Manda had forgotten about the vision the shaman had told him about and how he had said the quest would find him, even if he didn't want it to. Manda, the elders were in agreement that for some reason the children needed to be kept safe. Well, let's get the children inside, Eve said as she got down from her rock and got up on the wagon with 2 arrows. Well, 2, I don't have any tea ready this time. She smiled at him. She was taking this all too easy, he thought. 50-plus children thrown into the cage was just a lot for him to take in. It was going to be a lot of work caring for that many, especially when they normally sleep in the day when the children were awake. I'll be in once he observed the rise of the parents, he told Eve, who nodded her head. He still had his duty to do no matter what was happening. By the time Father was up and full, and they had gotten the children into the cave and the wagon was on their way back down to the valley, he thought of the shaman, wondering what he knew that he had not told him. An hour later, Mother began to rise, right when he knew it would. He got down from the rock he was sitting on and headed to the cave opening. He was sure that Eve had her hands full trying to get the children to settle down for the night. When he reached the opening, he turned and looked back at the parents. Suddenly, they seemed to jump halfway across the sky as the earth rumbled. Mother shuddered hard and began to break up, pieces moving in all directions. He was shocked and unable to move until the earth shook the second time. He ran into the cave as rocks began to fall from the cliff face. He found it hard to stay up on his feet as he moved deeper, the ground moving in ripples. He could hear the rocks falling, blocking the cave entrance. The rumbling stopped before he reached the cavern where Eve and the children were. They were all fine, shook up a lot, but none were hurt. It took him some time to settle the children down, and he was able to tell her what he had seen. The elders had told him to keep the children in the cave for 3 days, but it took him 6 to clear away back out to the surface. It was midday when he stepped out of the cave and was shocked by what he'd seen. The valley where the village was now a huge lake. He wondered if any of the tribe was still alive. 6 months later, Eve and him were sitting on their rock watching the sunset. It was now setting a good 20 degrees different than before. The night was starting to get cold. Winter was coming, but they were ready. The supplies would last through the next year, so as soon as the winter was over, they would be able to plant crops. They had built 2 longhouses, one for the boys and one for the girls, and they stayed in the cave. He still found it strange to see just Father in the sky. Most of the kids now called it Luna, after a fairy tale who would dance across the sky when she was happy. This did not bother him much, because now they were calling Eve and him Mother and Father. The shaman was right. The quest had found them. They were now the parents of a new world. given him mother and father. The shaman was right. The quest had found them. They were now the parents of a new world.